Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for coming. This is, I'm excited. This is our first meeting of the semester. And second of all, it's really nice to see Nichole again. She's been gone for a few years and up to the far reaches of the northern states. And so it's really great to have her come back and speak to us and tell us about what all she's been doing since she left, but I'll let her tell all about that. And this is Nicole Griffin.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
It's great to be here. As Carol said, it has been quite a while. I think it's been maybe 5 years. So I barely recognized this place when I came back. And it's great to have everyone online too. I'm not sure if you're there right now, but you will be later. So I am going to talk about forensic accounting today. How many of you are familiar with forensic accounting or have heard of the term? Most of you? Cool. All right. So this is the agenda. I'll first go through my background, my education, and some of my professional experience. Then I'll give an overview of forensic accounting, give some case examples, what the role of a forensic accountant is, what their responsibilities are, and some of the core skills that you would need if you want to pursue this career. And then I'll go through some of the credentials of financial experts outside of the CPA. Then I'll talk about the MAC program because Dr. Bishop told me that a lot of students here are interested in the Georgia Southern MAC program. Then I'll also talk about career opportunities and finish off with networking, the importance in networking. All right, so I graduated from GSW in 2011, and after graduation, I decided I wanted to study for the CPA exam, try to knock that out of the way. I thought that I didn't want to pursue a master's, so I took some time off and studied for the exam, and I also took one additional class to meet the requirements to get a CPA. So I passed the CPA exam, started applying for jobs, wasn't having any luck. So I started doing some research on different master's programs in Georgia, found Georgia Southern's forensic accounting program, and thought it would be a great fit for me. So I ended up applying and attending Georgia Southern to complete that program, and I graduated from Southern in 2013. Upon graduation, I started out at Malden & Jenkins in Bradenton, Florida. I'm sure many of you have heard of Malden & Jenkins. They have an office in Albany. So I was there for about 8 months doing tax and audit work. I knew that I wanted to pursue forensic accounting, so I found a position online at Eisner-Amper, did some research on the firm, and ended up applying for the job up there. I didn't know anyone in Philadelphia. I just, went for it because it was something that I wanted to do for my career. So after Malden & Jenkins, I went to Eisner-Amper. I was there for about 1.5 years, and within that time, I also applied for a position at the FBI because it was something that I always wanted to do. I thought it would be a really cool job. The process took about, I'd say, 10 months from my application date up through the time I was hired. It was a very intensive process. I would say it's worth the wait. I've heard, horror stories that some people it's taken 7 years to get in, so it really just depends on how lucky you are, I guess. I was actually on the FBI for about 6 months, and then I returned to Eisner-Amper, and I'm in the same position now that I was before. So Eisner-Amper is a national accounting firm. We have offices all across the U.S. We have a California office, offices in Florida, and we have several offices in the Northeast, Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey. And we also have people that work in other areas, like in Texas and Boston, and we are pursuing other locations. So I'm a manager in the financial advisory services there, and what I generally focus on, I work in litigation support and also do investigations, and I would say my niche is construction and damages calculations overall, which I'll touch on a little bit later. At the FBI, just to give you a little background of what I did there, I was also a forensic accountant there. I teamed up with the special agents on various investigations. I worked on a counterintelligence case, well, 2 counterintelligence cases, a government fraud case and a healthcare fraud case. And really what my role was to take the financial records, primarily bank statements, and I would dump them into a software that we had. It was called BankScan, and then export that into Excel and try to find patterns, try to identify any unusual activity, try to determine if there were accounts that were unknown to us that we might want to issue a subpoena for, really just trying to trace, activity, what may be suspicious activity, or try to identify new leads. So that's, I guess, enough about my background for now, and we'll get into why I'm here. So, forensic accounting, this really is, this involves the application of specialized knowledge and investigative skills that CPAs have, and they use those skills to evaluate, analyze evidence in order to, in order to give an opinion or help their clients, and really just take the evidence and present it in front of the trier of fact, whether that be a judge or jury. So forensic in general, this means suitable for use in a court of law. So whether it's forensic technology, forensic science, forensic accounting, it really just means, for use in a court of law. I have had people ask me, seriously, do you go out on crime scenes? No, I do not. Not what that is. So I give them a blank stare, and then I have to explain exactly what it is. So this chart is from the AACPA, and these are the 7 primary practice areas in which most forensic accountants work. Most of you are probably familiar with financial statement misrepresentation and fraud prevention, detection, and response, but we also do other things. We have several people at my firm that work in family law, so this would involve matrimonial disputes where you've got a wife and a husband going at each other, trying to, determine whose property is whose, and then we will also we'll do public record searches and stuff like that to figure out if there are hidden assets for one of the parties. We also do data analysis. Our team out in California, they have a robust, I can't even try to explain it to you. They do a lot of technology things out there. So we dump a lot of stuff to them, like if we get emails from a client and we need to analyze them or look for suspicious activity, we'll just send it out to those guys. Our team also performs valuations, and then I would say my focus is economic damages calculations and the fraud prevention, detection, and response. So I'm assuming most of you, through your studies here, have probably heard about the Madoff scandal and Enron and all of that. Is that accurate to say? Okay. So really, why we are here and why this profession has grown so much is, business practices, the poor business practices and the legal activities that, are constantly going on. It really, you need someone like us to go in and figure out what the problem is. Most of the time, if, companies don't have the ability to look at things objectively, especially smaller companies, they trust their employees. They would never do wrong. It takes someone going in and really figuring out, okay, is there something going on? So some of our responsibilities. I like to say we're really just sophisticated puzzle solvers. My partner actually uses this to try to explain to attorneys what we do. So when clients retain us, we really don't get that many pieces of the puzzle. So what they do give us, we'll analyze it, we'll try to come up with additional pieces that we think are necessary to form an opinion on, and so we'll will request those additional pieces, but I can say with 100% certainty we've never gotten all the pieces of the puzzle. So it's really up to us to take the pieces we have and try to create that overall financial picture in order to present it to our client or, again, the trier of fact if it goes to litigation. We also review and interpret financial and non-financial data. So financial data would be your typical like financial statements, tax returns, general ledgers, cash disbursement journals, cash receipts journals, bank statements, those types of things. Non-financial data, depending on what type of case we're working on, we may review contracts. If there's a contract dispute, we look at loan documents. We'll review email correspondence, and we also do public record searches. So once we get all the data that we need, specifically the financial data, we will conduct forensic analyses. I would say Excel is our go-to. This is where we do most of our analysis. We do have some professionals that I work with that are experts in other databases. I myself know Excel. And then, have you guys heard of IDEA? Caseware? Any of you? So this is a forensic tool which I learned about during the MAC program at Georgia Southern. I've used it several times. Really, in the beginning, it was just a way to import PDFs and get the data out into Excel, but you can actually run a lot of analysis within IDEA. So sometimes we've had clients that have been concerned with fraud in the AP area, so we'll take their general ledgers, their cash disbursement journals, dump it into IDEA, and you can run, and I can't remember the name of it, but it'll basically take the data and you can determine whether there are duplicates within that data. So if invoice numbers are in there, you can determine if there are duplicate invoices, which of course one would have to question that. There's also another thing in there called Benford's Law. So there's several tests that you can run with that. There's a first digit test, first 2 digits, first 3 digits, the last 2 digits. And what this does is it takes the data and there's a normal, a normal pattern of what you should see with numbers. And it'll basically give you an output, and for the amounts that are in that financial data, it will say, this number doesn't look right. This doesn't flow with the pattern. So it's not necessarily that there's fraud there. You would just, take a deeper look at those amounts. Again, we perform research and do public record searches on individuals and entities. So sometimes I've had to do a lifestyle analysis on an employee that was suspected of fraud within a company. So we'll go out, look online, see what we can find on LinkedIn, Facebook, all the social media platforms, and we'll also do searches for real estate records. So we'll go to the county website, see if they're, what type of house they're living in, what's the value of their home, because if we know what their income is, can they really afford the home that they're living in? Most fraudsters are living beyond their means. And then for entities, oftentimes we'll go out to the state website and do a search on the entity to see if it's active or legitimate. And then we'll also look out on Edgar or go to the company's website to get annual reports if we need to pull their financial information. We also prepare reports and exhibits to communicate our findings. So exhibits are key because, if you're presenting all of this information that you've evaluated, most clients don't understand what's going on if you're reading a report, so the exhibits really do help present the information in a simple way, and that's ultimately what we want to do. That's why we're hired in the first place, to make things simple and easy to understand. And then we also assist in legal proceedings. If there's litigation, we could ultimately go to court and testify or testify at deposition. the forensic accountant. There are two distinct roles. So we can be hired as a consulting expert or a testifying expert. There are some similarities between the two, but there are differences as well. The consultant generally conducts the same type of work as the expert witness does, but they have more protections and they're not under so much scrutiny. So oftentimes attorneys, because they're advocates for their client, they will hire a consultant to advise on strategies, give them a report, to give us, because us as a forensic accountant, again, we're objective. We're gonna have an opinion on our findings, and whether the client likes it or not, they have to accept it. So oftentimes, attorneys will hire consultants first, get the information, and determine whether they want to disclose that to the other parties. The attorney work product doctrine, this doctrine is what protects the consultant's work product. So your work papers, your draft reports, your exhibits, those types of things are protected from the other side in a dispute. So there's a plaintiff, there's a defendant. If you're on the plaintiff's side working with the plaintiff's attorney, your work product cannot be disclosed or would not be disclosed to the defendant. It's basically covered under the attorney-client privilege. And the consultant does not testify. So there are times when an attorney may want the consultant to transition into an expert witness role, but you have to be really careful with that, because if you don't want the consultant's work to end up being produced to the other side, you would obviously want to keep them as a consultant. Well, an expert witness, this is what most of the partners and directors at my firm do. So their ultimate goal is to render an opinion to the trier of fact. Trier of fact may be a judge or jury. Most disputes and most litigation, once we submit our reports, the expert will be brought in to deposition. They'll be questioned on their report and their findings, and then, assuming these things don't settle, they'll go to trial, and they'll also present their findings there. Discovery, again, as I was talking about before, expert witness work product is not protected by the attorney-client privilege. There is a rule in the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, it's number 26, and this basically sets out what is protected and what's not protected by the expert witness. I think it was in 2010 where the laws changed. Originally, draft reports and draft exhibits and work papers and all of that stuff were discoverable by the other side. But now, the expert witness is protected. Their draft reports and their draft exhibits and some email correspondence with the attorneys are protected from being discovered by the other side. But again, I would always, I'm always caution about this, because you never know if it will ultimately be discoverable by the other side. So you just want to be careful with drafts and stuff like that. Written report is another difference between the expert witness and consultant. And then a Dahlberg challenge. This I will go into on the next slide, actually. All right, so Rule 702, this is from the Federal Rules of Evidence, and it basically says, a witness who is qualified as an expert by knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education may testify in the form of opinion or otherwise. If the expert has specialized knowledge in the area, the testimony is based on sufficient facts, and if the testimony is product of reliable principles and methods, and then if the expert has reliably applied those methods. So if you're hired by, it actually doesn't matter what side you're hired by. Opposing counsel is always out to have your testimony excluded and have your report excluded. So I I would say most new experts are always going to face a dollar challenge, and I do know well-known experts that still face these challenges. Some of the things that are required by an expert are to have publications and testimony experience. This really shows their expertise, and it helps with not being excluded or not having their testimony excluded. So you just always want to make sure as an expert that you're relying on proper methods and you're not going off in left field and creating your own method to calculating damages or whatever it may be. So here, I'm going to discuss one of my practice areas, which is calculating damages, specifically lost profits. So in order to, well, the purpose of calculating damages and specifically lost profits is to make the plaintiff whole again, or to estimate what a plaintiff's revenue would have been should the defendant not have done a wrong act. So lost profits, a simple way to calculate this is lost revenues minus incremental cost. So incremental cost, this is basically just your saved expenses or your avoidable expenses. These will be things like utilities or cost of goods sold, things that are associated with the revenue that would have been in place had the bad act not been, or had the defendant not done the wrong act. So I actually want to go through an example, and I'll try to not get too lost in the numbers. Let's see. So just to give you a little background on this case, we were hired by counsel for a defendant, and this was a subrogation case. So a subrogation case is basically when someone steps in, or one party steps in for another party. So in this instance, there was an insurance company that was suing the contractor, which we're representing the contractor, and they were suing them for damages for a partial roof collapse at a pharmacy. So the pharmacy had hired this contractor sometime in 2011 to renovate a building in order to transition it into a pharmacy. And I think it was sometime in 2014 when the roof actually collapsed due to too much snow that had built up on the roof. So the insurance company, or I should say the insured, the pharmacy, filed a claim with the insurance company for building repairs, damages to personal property, and loss of income. And the insurance company paid that claim, so then they were going after the contractor now because they had made that payment, and they were basically the subrogee going after the contractor trying to reap those or recover those amounts that have been paid out to the insured. So the insurance company, I'm going to call it ABC Insurance Company. That's the easiest thing right now. So ABC Insurance Company had hired a forensic accounting firm to calculate lost income due to the roof collapse. So one thing to note, when you first calculate damages or lost profits, you have to determine the loss period. Generally, the loss period is from the date of the wrongful act, or in this case, the roof collapse, the damage, through the date in which the business is back to normal. So this would have been the roof is repaired and the pharmacy is reopened and they're selling, prescriptions again. Other times, I would say in contract disputes, the loss period may be based on the term in the contract. It really just depends. There's also case law out there that may determine the loss period. So once we determine the loss period, we would then calculate lost revenues, and there are multiple methods out there, but there are two common ones that we use. The first one is before and after method. So this is basically looking at a party's historical revenue or historical financial information, and then projecting what the revenues would have been should the event not have taken place. So if the roof hadn't collapsed, what would their revenue have been? Because most of the time you would think, you look at historical data, and most people use this to make projections. They do their budget based on this. It really is just a reasonable basis for what your revenue should have been. The other method that's commonly used is called the Yardstick Method, or the benchmark. So things like looking at a party's operations in another location may be a way to project revenues, or looking at industry data for the specific industry, in this instance pharmacies, and then using that to estimate what revenues would have been. So once the lost revenues are calculated, again, you're going to look at incremental cost. These are going to be, most of the time, they're going to be your variable expenses that would have been avoided. Things that would not be avoided most of the time would be rent, insurance, and those types of things. Depreciation is another thing. So anyways, I'm going to get into the financial part of this. So when the forensic accountant on the other side, I'm going to say ABC, let's see, ABC is the pharmacy, XYZ is the contractor, and ABC Insurance Company is the pharmacy's insurance company, obviously. So when the forensic accountant for the insurance company developed its calculation, it looked at the historical data for 2012 and 13. So again, the roof collapse was in 2014. So they wanted to take a look at how did revenue grow from 12 to 13. And this is going to be our basis for projecting what the revenue should have been had the roof not collapsed in 2014. So what they found was there was 11% revenue growth from 2012 to 13. So using this 11%, they took the actual monthly revenue in 2013 and applied that 11% to get what 2014's revenue should have been. Then once they determined that, they compared it to what actual revenue was for during the loss period. One thing to note, this pharmacy did open up at a temporary location, so they weren't completely wiped out from generating revenue. So we took their actual revenue, or I should say the other forensic accountant took the actual revenue, compared it to what was projected, and then came up with a lost revenue of $950,000. Then, I'm sure y'all are familiar with, well, that would have been like a horizontal analysis. Is that how it's still termed? For determining saved expenses or incremental costs, you would do a vertical analysis, and with this, they determined that cost of goods sold, variable selling, which was, I think, credit card purchases that were made, and there was one other account. They determined that these would have been the avoidable costs. So using the vertical analysis, cost of goods sold was roughly 86% of sales in 2013. They did not look at any other historical data. They only looked at 2013 when they were determining all of these expenses as a percentage of sales. So they backed out the incremental cost, got to a lost profit, and this is actually a business interruption claim. There are some nuances to that, but I won't get into the details. But in this situation, there was a 72-hour waiting period, which also had to be backed. The revenue during that period had to be backed out. and they got to a total loss of $123 grand. So because we were representing the contractor in this case, we were tasked with evaluating their calculation and trying to poke holes in it. And it was pretty easy, actually. So generally, when you're projecting revenues or making any kind of projections, you want to look at historical data 3 to 5 years, generally. 1 year is not sufficient, and that's all that this other forensic accounting firm did. They took from 2012 to 13, came up with a percentage growth, and applied it to determine what revenue would have been. So that was an easy one. So because there was limited financial information, it actually only went back to 2011. We only had 1 additional year to use, but when we did this, we determined that there was only a 1% growth from 2011 to 2012. So, I mean, it's clear that 11% could be an anomaly. We don't know because we don't have 2010 and, previous years, but it's definitely not, an obvious growth. The other thing is that, remember I talked about the benchmark or yardstick method for projecting lost revenues. They didn't look at the industry data out there. So this was a small pharmacy. I mean, most of us are familiar with CVS and Walgreens and all the larger pharmacies. So there are some differences between these types of entities, but it is general practice to look at industry data. So what we did, we went out, pulled CVS, I don't even know why I wrote Walmart right here. That should be Walgreens. We went and pulled CVS's and Walgreens financial information from 2012 through 2015. And then we also had someone at our firm pull industry reports from these 2 sources, Integra and Avis World. So as you can see, the growth, I don't see, this is cumulative growth over here, by the way. So in here, nowhere do I see 11%. I think the highest we see here is 7% growth, and that was for the industry overall, and that was in 2014. So using this information, we came up with an average. We first used CVS and Walgreens on their own, and I believe 7%. Yes, CVS had a 7% growth in 2012. And then we also looked at the industry overall, and again, this was 7% growth in 2014. So because we were focused on the loss period in 2014, this was actually the information that we used. And even if you look at the cumulative growth over these 4 years, CVS had a cumulative growth of 20%. If you look at ABC Pharmacy, it was 31%. So that's 50% higher growth rate than CVS, a really large pharmacy. And, comparing it to Walgreens, you're looking at 5 times greater growth rate. So this seems completely unreasonable to me. So using the industry data and using the average of the 1% that we came up with from 2011 to 12, with the 12 to 13 growth of 11%, took an average of that, got 6% growth rate, and then applied that to the pharmacy's 2013 revenue to get the projected revenue in 2014 during the loss period. We compared that to actual revenue, came up with a lost profit amount, and did the same exercise with the industry data. And what we were able to do was to knock this down. So there were 2 scenarios, one being the average and one being the industry data. We knocked this 123 down to 90,000 and 86,000. So it's not much, but because cost of goods sold was so great here, that really knocked down their lost profits. So that's just, I find it interesting, maybe a little trying for you, but it's, I thought it would be cool to explain one of the cases that I had worked on.
What kind of fee would you end up having to do that work? I mean, if you could do all this and you knock it down from 123 to 90, I mean, that's substantial, but if you incurred a $30,000 fee to get it done.
So that is the problem. Luckily here, there were also other issues in the case, the building repairs and the damages to personal property. So the building repairs, we knocked down substantially. I think it was around $1 million, and we knocked it down to like 200,000 because there just wasn't enough supporting documentation. There were unnecessary repairs that weren't really due to the roof collapse. So that's an issue most of the time. You know, do we provide any value at the end of the day? Because it is so much for us to do this work, and if we're not adjusting, you know, damages that much, then is it worth it? But I think that's litigation in general. I mean, attorneys are expensive, and yeah. So, other areas that I practice in, have any of you ever heard of integrity oversight monitoring? It's kind of a new thing out there. So this is really just an independent third-party oversight and compliance service. And you really just go in and you're trying to prevent and or detect fraud, waste, and abuse at an entity. So one of the organizations that we perform this work for is New Jersey Transit in New Jersey, obviously. Whenever Superstorm Sandy, or I guess Hurricane Sandy hit, I guess that was in 2012, when that hit, it destroyed a lot of the equipment, some of the powerhouses, and a lot of the rail lines at New Jersey Transit. So what happened is the New Jersey Transit did a damage assessment on the entire area, came up with what needed to be repaired, and they submitted this damage assessment to the FTA, which is the Federal Transit Administration. The FTA ended up funding several of these organizations, actually. There was also the New Jersey Port Authority, I think the other transit authorities in New York also got some funding. But what the integrity oversight monitors do, they go in and make sure that these funds are being used as they're supposed to be. There are guidelines out there for how these funds can be used. So there are two primary, I'm trying to think of the word right now. There are two primary areas in which these funds were provided for. So there was repair, and then there was resiliency. I think New Jersey Transit was funded over $1.8 billion. And it seems like a lot, but considering the damage, it really isn't. So there were like $600,000 for repair, and then the remainder of that was for resiliency. So one of the things that we had to look for here is we go out on field observations, so we go out to the tracks and see what the workers are doing, and we make sure that whatever they've submitted a bid for, or whatever a contractor has submitted a bid for, and whatever work is being done is actually what's been submitted to the FDA and is being paid for. So one of the issues here is that if a powerhouse was damaged and was flooded completely, and New Jersey Transit was supposed to go in and just repair the house, then we have to make sure so that's all that's being done. Resiliency, the resiliency category is improving the setup of these powerhouses or some of the equipment or the rail lines in general. It's really trying to make sure that if something like this ever hit again, that there wouldn't be so much damage. And it seems kind of silly that New Jersey Transit would go in and fix all these things and not also improve it at the same time, but those are the guidelines, and they can only repair for specific things like that. So really, we're just going in making sure that, you know, they're doing what they're supposed to be and not wasting the money or there's no fraud going on. Another area, fraud risk assessments. Time. Am I over? Oh, no, it's
Yeah.
Okay. Fraud risk assessment. This is really just going in at an organization, looking at their internal controls. We generally review their policies and procedures, try to figure out if there are any weaknesses, and then interview individuals in specific functional areas. And our work product from this usually ends up being a fraud risk matrix. So we'll have, depending on what functional areas we look at, we would have specific fraud schemes that might take place in these functional areas. So we'll identify those schemes, then we'll have two columns for likelihood and impact. So what's the likelihood that this fraud would take place or would not be detected, and what is the impact should it not be detected or should it be committed? And this really is simply just rating it low to high. We have a low, medium, and high. And one thing with the impact is that if it's an organization like New Jersey Transit, there's a reputational impact if a fraud is discovered. It's not only what's the financial impact of a fraud scheme. And then we would also identify any mitigating factors. So what policies are in place that would catch a fraud if it was attempted, and what are contributing factors? What are the areas that can be improved in order to detect these things? And the last thing, forensic and fraud investigations. These range from looking at potential expense reimbursement frauds to simply tracing money in and out of trust accounts, trying to determine if someone has embezzled money. So it really can be anything. It's always different. Here, I just wanted to kind of discuss some of the differences between an audit and investigation. So as auditors, they're ultimately opining on the client's financial statements. And in an investigation, we're going in and trying to determine the likelihood that a fraud has been perpetrated and what is the magnitude of the fraud. Audits are recurring, they're annual, you know they're coming every year, you usually have the same clients, you know when your busy season is going to be. Investigations, they can pop up out of nowhere. They could be anywhere from weeks to months to years. When I first started at Eisner-Amper, one of my directors had been working on a case for, I think, 5 years, and I was working on it with him until I left the first time. So they can go on for quite a long time. Auditors are concerned with materiality, and during investigations, we're not. Depending on what type of investigation it is, we are looking down to the penny. We're never concerned with materiality. Evidence, the difference between investigation and audit is auditors have general practices or general procedures that they perform, whether it's inquiry or observations or reperformance. In investigations, we look at financial and non-financial data, do public record searches, conduct interviews. The interviews, I would say, are a little more intense than an audit interview. They can get hostile. It's pretty entertaining. And then auditors provide reasonable assurance. As all of you know, there's no way to provide absolute assurance just because of the nature of an audit. The auditor's not looking at every single thing that's there. They're doing testing and determining, whether, you look at materiality, and then you're just doing testing based on, past performance, and if there are any changes, There's just absolutely no way to provide absolute assurance. And then with an investigation, if it is to go to litigation, or if it is to go to trial, we're basically just establishing facts to refute or support suspicions. And if it's a civil case, we have to prove with preponderance of evidence. And this, if you want to look at it in a percentage, as a percentage, this would be 51%. And if it's a criminal case, then it's proved beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not really up to us. We just present the facts. We would never opine on, has someone committed fraud. We would never say that someone has committed fraud, and we would never make a legal opinion. It's up to the trier of fact. I actually want to go back. All right, so I have something to hand out to y'all. It's just a little exercise. Thought it would be kind of fun to see. I guess I can get one of these. Hand them out.
Do we need some pens or pencils or something? I can get some.
So this is a list of core skills from the AICPA. So what the AICPA did was they had multiple questionnaires that were given to attorneys, academic people, and CPAs. And what they wanted to determine was what these respondents thought were the most important skills that a forensic accountant should have. And this is only one of the questionnaires. This is the core skills. There were also two questionnaires, one being enhancing skills, and the other being traits of a forensic accountant. So like intuitiveness, attention to detail, these types of things. So this is the core skills questionnaire. So if y'all just take a couple minutes and read through the list and then rank, I would say pick your top 5. What skills you think a forensic accountant should have, just based on what you've heard today and what you know in general about forensic accounting. Are done.
Is this out of an article? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can send the article to you guys if you have any interest. No good?
Yeah.
All right. So this table is set up where the attorney's opinion matters the most, which is pretty they're usually the ones that are hiring us. But the attorney, I can read it right here. The attorney thought that being an effective oral communicator was the most important trait or core skill for a forensic accountant to have. Did any of you choose that as number one? No. Number two for the attorney is simplifying the information. You know, no matter how good you are at accounting or how good you are at finding a needle in a haystack, it really doesn't matter if you can't present the information to the trier of fact. A lot of times juries are selected, I would say, strategically. So I'm not going to say juries are unintelligent, but they're unintelligent to the issues and the cases in which they're listening to, especially some of our damages cases that we work on. It is pretty difficult to try to simplify the fact patterns and how the numbers work. So simplifying information is extremely important. Critical strategic thinker, all three respondents thought this was important. Identifying key issues, and then auditing skills and investigative ability were a tie for number 5 for the attorneys. That's the remaining. So as you can see, being an effective communicator is high on the list for everyone, and then also being a strategic thinker. What were your guys' number 1, if anyone wants to like volunteer and throw out your answer?
Yeah, I'm the strategic thinker for number 1.
It's a good one, yeah. Which, I mean, CPA and academic both thought that was the most important thing.
And I mean, you know, as an accountant, when you're going to be generating reports, that's why I thought the written communication would be pretty high ranked.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, that's your evidence, that's what you're using.
Mm-hmm.
So.
This is very important. Anyone else? Your number 1? No volunteers? Alright, so I'll just go through some of the credentials that forensic accountants hold. Of course, a lot of us have our CPA. One thing about our firm, and probably a lot of firms that have forensic accounting services, a lot of people are not accounting majors. So we have finance majors, econ majors, we have JDs, attorneys that have turned CPA. So, you know, as long as you get the requirements that are needed to sit for the exam and to get certified, that's all you really need. You don't need an accounting education. Certified in Financial Forensics, CFS. A lot of forensic accountants hold this. It's a credential that the AICPA has, and I can't remember what year it came out, but it's highly regarded in our world. It covers all areas: bankruptcy, valuation, forensic accounting, matrimonial, all types of things. Certified Fraud Examiner, I'm sure you guys have heard of this, CFE. Any of you guys have an interest?
Insurance person.
What now?
Insurance.
Insurance person?
But, somebody investigating insurance claims for fraud and that kind of thing, maybe.
That could be. I mean, they can investigate any type of fraud.
Right.
Any of you have interest in the CFE? No? It's a good one to have. What about the CPA? Are you guys, I mean, I don't know where you're sitting as far as if you're coming back to school for a different degree or if you're about to graduate. Have you, any of you started studying? Are you early on in your education career?
Yeah, most of these folks are, you know, traditional students who haven't, don't have a degree yet.
Okay, got it. Well, it's coming, so.
Dun, dun.
The ABV, this is for valuation experts. The CFA, a lot of people that are finance majors have this credential. It's very high regarded too. I hear it's as difficult as the CPA exam, although I don't know if I believe that. And then there are other credentials listed here. I mean, I can send Dr. Bishop this presentation if you want to look more into some of these certifications. So do y'all know the requirements for the CPA exam, or, you know, what the exam entails? Any interest in knowing?
We do.
Yeah, it would probably be a good idea to review.
Okay, so there, and this is just memory, there are 4 sections to the exam. 2 sections are 4 hours and 2 sections are 3 hours. I believe Reg and BEC, I think it's business, you know, Dr. Bishop, business something concept. BEC, I can't remember the.
Economic, probably,
I think that is it. So those are 3 hours, and then audit and financial something reporting are 4 hours. I don't know if any of you have looked up study methods. There are several there are several companies out there, like Becker is a really popular one.
So what did you use?
I use Becker.
Okay.
I highly recommend it. I passed them all on the first try, which probably had a little bit to do with the fact that I took time off to do it as well, but it prepared me. I mean, I can't even believe how well it prepared me. Although I did leave crying from one of them. My life was over and then I did pass. I did. They must curve it. But anyways, so you have 4 exams, and I don't remember the time period, so if you don't pass all of them on the first try, you can obviously retake them. But I think they all have to be passed within,
I think it's 18 months
18
from the
months, yes.
first successful score.
yes, 18 months. So, I do know several people that have lost exams, my sister being one of those. It's really tough. But yeah, I think to sit, you have to have a graduate degree, not a graduate degree, I'm sorry,
Undergraduate.
a bachelor's degree, and then I believe it's 24 hours in accounting for you to sit. That doesn't mean get certified. So in order to get certified, once you pass the exam, you have to have, I think it's 30 hours in accounting above the intro level, and then 24 hours in business courses, and then a year's experience, which consists of 2,000 hours of work, whether it be forensic accounting, audit, tax, it really doesn't matter. And then I think that's it. I mean, highly recommend Becker though. Becker's the way to go. Although some people have different study methods. I don't know how you guys work, but they have the videos where I think Tim Garrity and Piero Lento are the 2 presenters, and I can't believe I remember their names. But I actually couldn't stand to listen to one of them, so I just read the book. Didn't watch the presentations at all. So it's really up to you. I mean, they have flashcards, and I think they have courses where you can go have like a 3-hour jam session right before you take the exam. So there are options. I mean, that's Becker though. I don't know about the other ones like Roger.
Did you work the problems?
I did. I worked the problems. Yes.
So like every problem?
Yes, I did. Front to back, everything. Yeah.
And how long did it take you for a section?
I did 1 a month. So there's, I guess the 3rd month, they don't have testing. So I had 2 and then 2.
And you worked full-time on it, so you worked 40 hours a week?
Oh, way
Okay.
more than that. It was like busy season.
Okay.
I basically sat at my computer and ate chips all day and flipped through the pages of Becker books. And when I passed the last one, I'm not a very outwardly expressive person, but I did run around the neighborhood screaming. It's pretty exciting to pass it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, if you guys have any questions, I can give you my card if you want to reach out and ask me anything for advice or whatever, you can do that. I mean, if you have any interest in fraud investigations, I do highly recommend the CFE. It's extremely easy compared to the CPA exam. The MAC program and Georgia Southern prepared me for this. I would say it was probably why it was so easy to me. But they do, like, the ACFE does a really good job with their exam prep. I think as a student, you can get it for maybe $350, and just read through the materials, take practice exams. I would say 70 to 80% of the questions that are on the practice exam show up on the actual test. And there are also 4 sections on the CFE. But yeah, it's a great certification to have. It's also highly regarded in our industry. So for any of you that are interested in the MAC program, I don't know as much about the general MAC because I did the forensic accounting concentration, but it is a 30-hour degree program, and I know that they offer the Becker review as some of their courses, so you can get credit for a course and obviously go and take the exam, which is great. For any of you that are interested in the forensic certificate, I would recommend reaching out to me. I know we're getting close on time. It really did prepare me. I mean, the expert witnessing class, we had a mock trial, we had several cases that we worked on. Our professor actually would be like the internet, where we would go out and do public record searches. So we were doing a fraud investigation, and we had to request documents from him, and he would either say yes or no. And if it was yes, he would provide us the documents. If it was no, he'd be like, he'd make all kind of funny comments. And then we also have cyber forensics, which that's actually the first time I had heard of IDEA. That course, it walks you through, I guess, collecting data and preserving it, and what you can do with some of the software out there. In the forensic accounting capstone, again, we had a lot of cases in there. We had to write reports and prepare exhibits. One cool thing with, and I don't know if they do it anymore, but before you go into the forensic accounting concentration, you have to take the fraud examination, or complete the fraud examination certificate. And this is 5 courses: macro fraud, micro fraud, fraud in the law, and a couple of other classes. But the IRS CID actually came out and did what was called Project Adrian. So we got to be an agent for the day, and we teamed up and did an investigation. I think ours was on horse gambling. Someone wasn't reporting all of their revenue from.
Really?
Surprising, right? But we got to follow people around and surveil them and video them with our phones, and do interviews and go to a judge and request a subpoena. And then we got to put on our belts with our fake guns and our handcuffs.
That'd be all.
Someone, so it was pretty fun. Great experience. But yeah, if you have any questions about it, or if you're interested in it, just let me know. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I'll speed this up, but opportunities that you have coming out of school with an accounting degree, I mean, they're endless. You can go the public accounting route if you don't want a life. And you can go the private route, which I hear has a better work-life balance. I wouldn't know. And I mean, there are several opportunities. So again, if you have questions, let me know. Public accounting really is a fantastic experience. I mean, even if you look at private companies, they're always looking for someone to have, public accounting experience, 3 to 4 years. So it really is great to have on your resume, and you learn a lot in a short amount of time. And I would say, at least in the forensic accounting world, you do something different every day. Nothing's ever the same. I mean, audit and tax, again, you know when your busy season is, but with us, it's feast or famine. I mean, sometimes we're sitting there twiddling our thumbs like, oh, we're going to be busy again, and then you wish you wouldn't have asked that. to tell you a horror story of time, I worked on an investigation where we went out to review client documents and interview some of the employees at our organization, and we were about to leave. It was around 5:30, we were about to leave, and the attorneys came in and said, we need you to stay. We think the authorities are coming in tonight, or tomorrow morning, to see the documents. And we're like, seriously? Okay, no problem, you know, kept our faith. And so we stayed there the entire night and unstapled documents, scanned all of them, and put them back together, so we could have them on file. So I left my house at 7:30 a.m. on a Wednesday. I left the client the next day at 10:30 a.m. So it's like a 30-hour day. It doesn't happen too often though.
Wow.
And just one thing I want to touch on, networking. This is really important. I was telling Dr. Bishop earlier, I did not do a good job of this when I was in my undergrad. I'm an introvert, so it's really hard for me to network and, I guess, meet new people. So I don't know what you guys have here, but this is a perfect way to meet professionals, the accounting club meetings. Do y'all have Beta Alpha Psi here? No? So we had that at Southern, another great way to meet professionals. ACFE student chapter, and, you know, if there are career days, I mean, really is important. I will tell you one more story. I would say it's not really about what your resume looks like, it really is about the connections you have on where you can go. When I moved up to Philly, I was living in an apartment complex and went downstairs with my dog, and the neighbors were like, oh, you have a really cute dog. So I started talking to them, and the woman told me her name, and it sounded familiar. And so I went and looked her up on Google, because that's what I do when I meet people. And I found out that she actually wrote the Barron's article on Madoff. She was one of the first people to question his methodologies. And I was like, this is so cool. I just met her. So I made sure to keep in contact with her. And anyways, I told her my interest of working at the FBI. So she actually had a connection there, a special agent, and reached out to him, sent him my resume, and they ended up calling me within a couple weeks, and, you know, not interviewing me, I shouldn't say that, just talking to me about my interests, and said that they did have an opening, they would call me back if, you know, I was qualified. They ended up getting the call back that I wasn't qualified, and so that was pretty disappointing, but I was like, oh, well, you never know what'll happen. I'll just keep a lookout for anything that's, you know, posted on the website. So I ended up getting a call back, I guess it was like 3 weeks later, and got an interview for a different GS level, and went in, and that's how I got the job. So I don't think I ever would have gotten in through the website. I mean, you never know. But again, it really is about the connections you make, and it's always important to just keep an open mind for meeting new people. So, any questions?
Well, about what you were saying there, Nichole is really good with keeping in touch with me, and I know that she does with other people that she's met in the past too. Like every 3 months or 6 months, I get a text that, you know, how's things going kind of text, you know, and that just keeps you at the top of the people's mind that you've met, and you never know when something might turn up. So I think it's always a good policy with previous employers or with previous professors to keep in touch.
Dr. Bishop actually got me my first job after...
First accounting job.
Yeah, my first accounting job. So, again, I was having trouble finding, you know, somewhere to work, and she knew someone at Malden & Jenkins, and they'd already hired their interns, I guess, but they needed a scan girl. I was like, okay, I can dig this. Anyway, I started with them, and I was like, okay, I'm going to scan the whole tax season. This is great. But I actually ended up getting promoted to an intern while I was there within 2 weeks. So, you know, you never know what comes out of
being a scan girl.
Don't be too proud to.
I actually have two, one, if you don't mind sharing, why did you leave the FBI?
Okay, it's a loaded question, but, so, really, I just wasn't challenged enough. So, the cases were really interesting, but my tasks were quite boring, some of the time, so really all I did was look at bank statements all day long. And I would write a report occasionally, but I really was looking through bank statements, trying to trace money, trying to,
Yeah, well, I was looking at it, it took 10 months to process in, and you spent 6 months like, I had enough of this. I didn't know if it was, better offer in the civilian world, the pay, the benefits were better, or if it was just the atmosphere. Right.
No, I mean, it was a great experience, it just wasn't for me.
Right.
I mean, I think if you're okay, there are a lot of accountants that are okay with doing the same tasks month to month, and if that's your thing, then, I mean, there were a lot of interesting things, so I did get to go out on interviews of informants, I went out on searches, I mean, it is a
You had
really
an
cool job.
FBI badge?
What?
FBI.
Unfortunately, I did not have a badge.
No,
I have a red,
yeah,
but
you
I
have the
didn't have a badge.
credentials, but not the badge, okay, but still, like, FBI.
Yeah.
The other thing I was gonna ask, you mentioned the difficulty after you got out, you said you had difficulty even after you got your CPA license? Finding, what were they using to?
I wasn't even getting responses.
Really?
I was applying online to firms that I wanted to work at, and, maybe I was being too selective, but I was sending plenty of applications out, and
Right.
I don't think I got a single response.
Wow.
So it was,
So how did you get the job at this firm?
at iGramper, I just applied online, somehow they were interested, I think it might have been.
Oh, no, that was, you were there before FBI, that's right.
I think it was probably the MAC, with
Yeah.
the forensic concentration.
When you worked at FBI, how many people would you say were CPA, like?
So, in the forensic accounting group, I would say 90% of us were CPAs. The special agents, there are a lot of CPAs, so that's actually one of the things that the FBI looks for. To be a special agent, you have to have 3 years of work experience, but they actually waive that for CPAs. I think you only have to have 2 years. So, they're always looking to have financial experts there because of all the frauds. Yeah.
So online they had a question, have you worked in a case that involved workers' comp, or is there such a thing as that?
There are cases that
Okay.
I know that other people at my firm work on, but I have not.
Okay. And then, there have been some scams in the university system in Georgia about P cards, purchasing cards. Have you, run into anything like that, where people are buying things for the company with their own with company funds, but personal purchases?
Not in the university system,
Okay,
so.
all right. Any other questions?
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for
Thanks for coming.